When I first heard the story, the thing that occurred to me was that, wow, it has all the elements of a Hollywood thriller. A villain, a good guy, a plot that clips along. Obviously, someone's gonna make a movie out of this. My name is Jeong. I am a special correspondent at Vanity Fair magazine, and this is the story of how Carlos Ghosn escaped from Japan. It's the spring of 2019. Carlos Ghosn, the CEO of Nissan, is under house arrest in Tokyo, Japan. He's awaiting trial for a variety of financial crimes, including embezzlement, using company resources to fund a lavish lifestyle. He has apartments in Brazil, Lebanon, Tokyo as well, and Japan. The house arrest is especially difficult for Ghosn, a man who has enjoyed various privileges, of which include being able to move around freely. He is not doing very well. Since his arrest, the Japanese criminal justice system has come under scrutiny. The conviction rate is 99.4%, which is meant to be a higher conviction rate than the conviction rate in North Korea. He's realized that it's entirely possible that I might be forced to stay in Tokyo for possibly all of my natural life. And then out of the blue, he receives a phone call from an acquaintance, a man we'll call Ali. Ali calls Ghosn and explains that I actually know a guy whose job is to get people out of sticky situations. Would you be interested? Ghosn, of course, says, by all means, go ahead. He is kind of anxiously excited. This is sort of the only shot he thinks he has for leaving Japan. Meanwhile, in America, a man named Michael Taylor, a former member of the American Special Forces, is going about his day when he receives a phone call from the same Ali. Ali is an old acquaintance of Taylor. They had met many moons ago in Iraq during the war. Taylor had helped Ali briefly and hadn't heard from him in 10 years and was quite surprised to hear from him. Ali goes, listen, we got a guy, he's close to us, he's in trouble, can you help him out? It depends, I need more information. Ali is being cagey and keeps prodding Taylor for a yes or a no. Ali is unwilling to provide any more information, forcing Taylor to go off on his own to conduct his own research. Taylor has since left the military, has entered the private contracting world, which a lot of military men do. He gets these phone calls all the time. All Taylor knows is that the man is Lebanese, very well off, and is in trouble. And it turns out that with those criteria, it's actually not too hard to find out that the man in question might be Carlos Ghosn. Once Taylor figures this out, he calls Ali back. Taylor ends up meeting with Carol Ghosn, Carlos Ghosn's wife, in Beirut in Lebanon. And this is where Carol starts explaining to Taylor her version of events, which is that, her husband has been unjustly persecuted in Japan, and everything that's happened to him is a kind of a corporate ploy to get him out of a traditional Japanese company that has always been very homogenous for a very long time. Carol is also the one who tells Taylor about the Japanese criminal justice system. Taylor goes away and starts doing his own research, and he is quite stunned by what he sees. He realizes that, here's an opportunity for me to right a kind of a wrong. So then he calls Ali back and says, yes, I'll do it. I'll take the job. So the first thing that Taylor does is to start to assemble a team. He begins by calling his old army buddies, and he recruits everyone from experts in airport security, IT, and police. He's recruiting as if for a heist movie. He has his team now. He has a deputy. They're working to figure out what needs to be done. There's only really two ways out of Japan, by sea or by air. They decide against the sea option because A, it would take too long, and B, because Taylor believes that Ghosn is unfit for travel for them. length of time. So that leaves him with air travel. They are unable to fly commercial because Carlos Ghosn is in fact a household name and will be recognized, which leaves them with the private jet option. So Taylor and his men are calling around all the private jet companies in the world to see if they might be open to harboring a fugitive, and most of them currently, politely at times tell them no. And then they chance upon a company that has a certain reputation, a Turkish private jet company that has been known to work in Venezuela, working around the American sanctions, and Taylor thinks, this might be our guy. They give them a call, and the jet company comes back saying, we've done this before, how can we be of service? The next piece of the puzzle is, how do you smuggle out a grown man who weighs 165 pounds? And it turns out that eventually you get to a box. What Taylor does is he gets 2 concert speaker boxes custom made that would typically fit a concert speaker, and he ensures that both of them are big enough for Carlos Ghosn to fit into. And with that, they're ready. So the day of the escape arrives. Taylor and his associate, George Zayek, an old friend who is also a colleague, flies from Dubai to Japan, specifically to Osaka Airport. The private terminal there does not have a scanner that is big enough for the cargo boxes to fit through. And of course, this was part of Taylor's plan. When they arrive in Osaka, they take the 2 cargo boxes and load them onto a van. The van takes Taylor and Zayek to a nearby hotel where they drop off the boxes, change clothes, and head for a train heading for Tokyo. So on the train to Tokyo, Taylor's phone begins an unexpected software update, and his first thought is, I wonder if the NSA knows, I bet they're on to me. And this is obviously a huge problem because without his phone, he has no way of keeping in communication with the rest of his team. So meanwhile, Carlos Ghosn leaves his Tokyo apartment wearing a surgical mask and a toque and heads for the Grand Hyatt Hotel. And the police weren't suspicious because the Grand Hyatt is one of the few places where Ghosn, who remains under house arrest, is allowed to go. Once Ghosn arrives at the hotel, he follows instructions that had been given to him days prior, which is to go upstairs to a room where Taylor and Zayek are waiting for him. Ghosn changes into new clothes, and the 3 men leave the Hyatt heading for the train station to return to Osaka. Once they get to the hotel in Osaka, this is where Ghosn climbs into one of the 2 boxes, and the now 2 men return to the airport. Taylor very deliberately arrives with only 20 minutes to spare, and as a result, they are whisked through security and customs. The boxes are not x-rayed because, as Taylor presently suspected, they don't have scanners big enough to fit those boxes through. So once they get onto the plane, Taylor goes back to the luggage hold. He cracks open the box that Ghosn is in. He takes a towel that is lying nearby and props it open and whispers to Ghosn that I will be back for you once it's wheels up. At 11:30, the flight leaves. It takes off from Osaka and flies through Chinese and Russian airspace, which is a specific ask that Taylor submitted, knowing that there is no extradition treaty between China and Russia and Japan. So soon after the flight takes off, Taylor goes back to the luggage hold to check on Ghosn, and he sees that Ghosn has already let himself out of the box and is sitting cross-legged atop the box, grinning ear to ear. The rest of the flight is uneventful. Taylor sits guard while Ghosn sleeps and eats and drifts back into sleep again. And eventually they land in Istanbul. Ghosn makes a connecting flight to Beirut, where his family awaits him. There are no thank yous and no goodbyes. Taylor is more interested in getting the job done. So the plan is a success. Ghosn is no longer in Japan and safely at home in Lebanon. The news of Ghosn's escape breaks in Lebanon pretty immediately. Michael Taylor's name gets out quite quickly as well. Japan, on the other hand, does not hear about this news until the following Tuesday. The reason is that the the CCTV cameras in front of his house is not a live feed, and it is only checked once a week. And of course, this was part of Taylor's plan. Once Japan learns that Ghosn has escaped, they issue a warrant for his arrest. The Interpol gets involved as well. So Taylor lays low for a while in Lebanon, but eventually he does fly back to New England, to rural Massachusetts in early spring. Months later, in mid-May, Taylor is sound asleep and is shooken awake by his 27-year-old son, Peter. US Marshals are at the front door to arrest both of them. And so it transpires that Peter Taylor had in fact been involved in Carlos Ghosn's escape. It had been Peter who had rented the hotel room at the Grand Hyatt in Tokyo. Unbeknownst to Taylor, the Tokyo prosecutor's office had submitted a request for extradition of both Michael Taylor and his son Peter Taylor. And in the whole time that Michael Taylor and Peter Taylor had been laying low, this extradition request had been making its way through all the various channels. Taylor is unsuspecting. He's shocked to his core that he is being arrested on American soil by US authorities on a crime that may or may not have been committed in Japan. He quickly assembles, him and his lawyers, a dream team of defenders, but the chances, even to them, it doesn't look great for various reasons. One being that the Japanese legal system does make it quite difficult for people to post bail, but also because of the nature of Michael Taylor's alleged crime. In the end, after the Great Escape, the mastermind, Michael Taylor, it turns out, didn't even receive a dime. This obviously surprised me, and I asked him, why did you do it? He told me, de presso liber, which is a special forces motto, meaning he was liberating the oppressed.